Can you hear me, Uncle?
Hello? Yeah, can you hear me? No,
Uncle,
no, wait.
Can you hear me? Rifat, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Am I audible to you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What about now? Am I audible?
Yeah, Uncle.
Yes, sure. So, do you know, let me ask Rifat first and Pee-wee. Have you ever analyzed a poem? I mean, in any language. It could be in your own native language. In Bangladeshi or in Indonesian, Pee-wee. Have you ever heard of poetry analysis?
I think the last time I analyzed poems or poetry when I was in elementary school and Bahasa Indonesia lesson.
What was that? I mean, the poem.
I don't know, I forgot, but it was like the famous
Let me check. Mark said that my voice is low. Is that true?
You know, I can hear you, Uncle.
Oh, really? Sometimes, clear, yeah. Clear. Okay, sure. So, what was the poem? What was the first poem you analyzed?
Oh, I forgot. It because when I was in elementary school and it was about can I say the preparation for national exam?
Okay.
Yeah, but I forgot.
By Khairil Anwar?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Hello, Ditch. Ditch is here. Okay, Ditch is here. Okay, sure. So what about Teach? Would you like to join me? Okay, let me bring you. Okay, before... Hello, assalamualaikum, Teach.
Waalaikumsalam.
MashaAllah. How are you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah.
I've been busy with the group. Where have you been?
Huh? What is it?
I've been busy with the group, and where have you been?
Yeah. I'm just in my boarding house.
Okay.
Okay.
Lying down.
Mm-hmm.
Laying down or lying down?
Lying down.
Okay, lying down. So what about you, Teach? How important is poetry analysis?
For actually English students.
I mean, what is the purpose actually? What is the purpose of analysis of poetry? What is the purpose of poetry analysis?
I think to understand the values.
Okay. Oh, she's here, Marks. Yes, Adifa is here. Let's just wait. We are not going to start our analysis. Okay, we are not going to start our analysis upon the road not taken, but we're going to be doing some kind of like, okay, I'm going to give you a small lecture on an introduction to poetry analysis. So at least you have some background knowledge of what is the so-called poetry criticism or literary criticism, okay? So anyway, probably you are questioning me, probably, or you have a question. I mean, why did you come up with poetry analysis topic or something like that, sir? Yeah, because I wrote my bachelor's thesis, my undergraduate thesis on poetry analysis. Then I wrote my master's thesis on linguistics. But I attended the School of English Teaching. So actually, I'm specialized in 3 areas. I'm specialized in English language teaching, also in English literature, also in English linguistics. But it's more of applied linguistics, right? The knowledge and
also you are an artist or something like that.
I'm also an acupuncturist. Yeah, a lot of jobs. Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. I prefer to be busy. I prefer being busy. Yeah, because I think it's gonna be it's a whole lot better than doing nothing, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So let's talk about this one first. Okay. Can you see that the road not taken?
Yeah,
we can see.
So wait, I think someone has gone.
Who is?
Oh, no. I'm here. Oh, no, Adifa is here.
Hi, Adifa.
Right, so, look at this one, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. So, let me start with an introduction. Who's echoing here?
Oh,
Who's echoing? Huh? Because my voice is echoing. Teach, perhaps? Hello? Oh, yeah! Right. It's coming from you, Teach. What about Pee-wee? Hello, Pee-wee?
Yeah, Uncle. Is it
Hello?
echoing?
Oh, yeah. No. It's echoing from Teach's side. It's hard. Teach's side. Yeah, celebrity is here. Yeah, Adifa is celebrity. Teacher Adifa. Yeah, I mute myself. How in the world you now? You're now the one who's causing echoes. The echo. Okay, I mute myself. What about you, Rifa? I think you're not echoing.
Is it echoing?
Yeah, no. No, it's from teacher's side. Teacher's side. Let me hop you off first. Okay, teach. Yeah. Okay. Right. So let me bring our queen. Okay. Wait. Adifa? Okay.
hello there.
Hello. How are you doing?
How are you? I'm good.
Hi, Adifa.
So, okay. So let's start. An introduction to poetry analysis. So it's more of a college lecture, actually. Yeah, college lecture. So let's start from this one first. The purpose of analysis. What is the purpose of poetry analysis?
I can have a kind of appreciation of that.
Yes, it could be. What about you, Rifat?
Yeah, it could be a better way to describe in many ways that you are clear to everybody.
Yeah, of course. But you need to know that analyzing poetry is an activity which has concerned many readers for many years. How long has it been going anyway? Poetry analysis. 100 years? Or 10 years? 4 years? So it is a given assumption that is worthwhile. Okay? That is worthwhile. Do you know what worthwhile means? Worthwhile. Rifat.
Yeah, worthwhile.
What is that? Worthwhile.
I think it's worthful to everybody. Worthy to everybody.
Profitable, worth all the time and effort you put in.
Yeah. Happy with?
Yeah, I think like all the time.
Okay. So, we take the leap of faith because we have found that analyzing poetry is an enjoyable and a little bit provocative mental exercise. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit provocative mental exercise. So actually, basically, we are concerned here with explaining the methods and techniques of taking a poem apart in order to arrive at a greater understanding of both its construction and its meaning. You know, like you are doing some kind of like a linguistic analysis, you will come up with the structural analysis and the meaning analysis. Which one is better, Arifa? When you want to analyze a poetry, do you prefer the versification analysis or the meaning analysis?
Well, I think they're both very important. Like,
Right.
you can dive deep into the meaning in terms of poetry, but structure is also important because it's not prose.
Yeah. So which one is better actually to start with?
Structure?
Or structure, the structure. We call it verse, right? Versification. Is that true? Versification. So we call it basic versification. So it's really important to have or to arrive at a greater understanding of both its construction and its meaning. So what about the second one? Okay, the apparatus of analysis. What is that?
What is the meaning of apparatus, Uncle?
Oh, it's like a like you know what I mean, like a devices, like an apprentice, like any apprentice, right? Treatments. Those who want to analyze poetry skillfully must first become familiar with our tools, the devices. What else?
Okay.
What is the other
Poetic devices,
synonyms?
right? Allegory and
It's
everything.
poetry. Yeah. It could be like that. Actually, we have more of them at our disposal than the novice might suspect. So actually, why do we? I think that why we do need to analyze poetry. Actually, my question is that: do you really want to write a poem, or you just want to analyze it, to critique poems?
So whenever you are writing a poem, then you need to analyze it. Whenever you are reading something, it's not the need to analyze it. Just reading and try to come with meaningful words.
Yeah, actually, the more you analyze poems, the more skilled you can write poems. So actually, you can analyze how great poets or poetess, how great poets and poetesses write or wrote their poems. So at least you have some kind of like a basic knowledge and how
Jason,
of the poems.
isn't poetesses dated?
Huh?
Like, we don't say poetesses anymore, do we?
Yeah, sure. So I mean,
This is male poets and female poets.
Yeah. So actually, it was a proposed word or proposed. What do you call that one? Proposed lexicon, actually. Lexicons. We don't really say poetess, actually. So poet can be for a female poet or a male poet. But really, in some books, when you read how to analyze poetry books, like poetry analysis books, you still come up with that term. Okay, poetess. Okay, but I think it's no longer used. I think, but I'm not really sure about that. I prefer using poet to poetess for a female poet, right? Okay, sure. So this is the apparatus. So what analysis looks for? So what analysis looks for?
Uncle, does it mean like, how can we analyze that poetry, maybe like figure of speech?
What do you look for in analyzing a poem? Things to seek for.
Yeah, I think like the structure, the meaning of the poems, like the tone of the poems.
Yeah, it could be point of view, right? It could be about facts, and it could also be some history. Yeah, some history. Sometimes you are realizing it. I mean, you realize it or not when analyzing a poem. You are also studying some history. Back then, really, like in Elizabethan era, perhaps that you could really have some portrayal or depiction of one particular life, okay, in one certain era. You know what I mean? Yeah, sure. So actually, you will have, really, really good knowledge of history actually by analyzing poetry. Sometimes they tell you, the poems tell you what happened, okay, in their times, okay, what happened in their times, or something like that. Right. So what analysis looks for. So actually, and also you need to mind this one. Different poems requires different approaches. So you cannot analyze one poem, okay, one poem, you cannot analyze all poems with the same approach, okay, with the same approach. So you really need to, you know what I mean, it is important to realize
you need to apply different types of
a large variety of ways in which can discuss poems and discuss poetry. But different poems or different kinds of poems must be approached in different ways. Okay, must be approached in different ways. So really, for example, the poem, the poem. The title is "Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening."
No. Yes.
Yes.
I remember the poem by Robert Frost again, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, the very second poem that appears on the Wikipedia page when you look up Robert Frost.
Right, the rhyme of the ancient mariner, or Lenore. So I wrote my analysis, or I did my analysis on some select works of Edgar Allan Poe. Lenore. Can we approach Lenore with the same approach as we do to the poem "Stopping by Wood on a Snowy Evening"? Can we do that? It depends, okay? So you can use one single approach, or you can combine them. Okay, like a multiple approaches in analyzing a poem. So also, the next one, diction and versification. What does that mean? Diction and versification. So the irreducible content of poem is of course the collection of words, right? So each word in a poem is selected for a particular reason. Like Adifa, okay? Adifa is also a poet, right, Adifa? How many poems do you have you written so far?
Around 12, 20, I don't know.
Oh, 12, 20. You are really a poet then. Okay. So actually, do you have a reason for selecting some words in your poems?
Yes, I do.
Or it only came out of need?
It does come out of need, but sometimes, when I write the structure, I then tend to modify it sometimes, like soon after writing, I edit out some words and put other words in place of that.
Okay. Right, so diction and versification. So diction, it deals with words, okay? Words, okay, themselves. But versification, it will be concerned with what is the so-called structure or patterning. But in poetry, would prefer to say rhyme, right? The rhyme of
the rhyme scheme.
Yes. Okay. And also, what about the limit? The limit of analysis. Is there any limit of analysis?
Yeah, of course. Whenever you will not find everything. You need to passion for it, and also sometimes whenever you are going to analyze something, you will not find the proper way, or it's not come up to the mark.
Yeah.
So when you're analyzing a poem, it's very, a lot of times what happens is that you have your own ideas of perception of a poem.
Sure.
Because it's a poem, you can perceive it in very different ways from each other. Like this poem we're talking about today.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong interpretation. Okay?
Exactly.
There's no right or wrong interpretation. So there is virtually no limitation placed on the analysis of poetry, for sure. So one can go quite far when trying to arrive at the meanings of a poem. One reaches out or reaches a point where one cannot find evidence for providing what the poem meant when he wrote certain lines. Sometimes, Adifa, I prefer to do some literal analysis. Okay, I prefer to do some literal analysis rather than symbolic analysis. And it depends on you, right? When we were trying to come up with only literal analysis of poems, we don't really care about metaphor, irony, anything. We just read the poem just the way it looks like, just the way it's poured into structure, right? And I think it might be the safest one, but it's the most superficial one. Do you like that kind of analysis, Adifa?
Not really, no.
What about Rifat?
It does not give you the true sense of the poem, right? When you're just reading it literally, it's not necessary it is meant to be that way. Sometimes what poets tend to do is they tend to play around with the words and mean or imply something they don't really talk about.
Sure, even though there's no such a limit of analysis, of poetry analysis, but please don't go too far. What I mean here is that, most of people analyze it that way, then you go miles away from, the majority of the analysis performed by most of the critics. Do you know what critic is? Do you know what a critic is?
A critic?
Yeah, literary critic. Like you can can find it in my personal bio. I mean, what is a literary critic or literary critic?
Somebody who judges, a literary work, who puts out all the merits and,
Yeah, so the discussion, right, about judging a poem for right reasons led us to consider momentarily what we meant by critic. But sometimes some people wrongly assume that a critic of poetry criticizes poems, that it says harsh thing about them. No! When you say this poem is beautiful and you really have some reasonable, you know what I mean? You have your reasons why this poem is considered an amazing poem, that you have become a critic. So a critic is not necessarily the one who says bad things or harsh things about the poems. Yeah, about the poems, really. Okay, so the critic. So then, what else? Critic. Critic. Then let's talk about two levels of meaning. So the first level, we call it literal meaning. Okay, the literal meaning. The second one? What is the second one? The symbolic meaning. A symbolic meaning. So the two levels of meaning, the literal and the symbolic ones. So when we talk about analyzing poetry, we must always bear in mind, that basic twofold approach of all of our poetry. Okay, all of our poetry. For example, that I asked Adifa actually just now. So, but actually, most of analysis, okay, in both linguistics and literature, always deal with either literal and symbolic meaning. It's just a matter of term usage. So literal meaning and symbolic meaning, it could be stated, unstated, right? It could be implied, okay, stated or implied. It could be explicature in pragmatics, the symbolic meaning, or it could be implicature. It could be denotative, it could be connotative. Okay, so they just play with words, with terms. Actually, they have similar meanings actually, but you see, right, the experts, they really want to attract you. And also, what makes linguistics and literature kind of confusing, they use a variety of peculiar terms. Okay, okay. So then the variety of reader response, and also we can discuss about that. And also we need to discover the poet in the poem. Do you know what I mean? Discovering poet in the poem.
Yes.
One reason, yeah, we take the analysis of poem is to discover what is characteristic of a particular poem. So what do you think of the characteristic of Robert Frost, Adifa?
The characteristic of Robert Frost?
Characteristic, yeah.
Okay, in reference to this poem or in general?
His poetic typology. His poetic typology. His poetic typology, sorry. His poetic typology.
So, okay, usually what we tend to do is relate it with the poet's life, right? About his poem, about this poem,
I mean,
we see what made him write it.
yeah, actually, you get to know it from reading most of his
The
poems.
poet's history.
Yes, yeah, most of his poems.
Where he came from, what he was thinking about, what he could have been thinking about, right?
For sure. So now let's talk about some guidelines and questions in analyzing or in helping you analyze a poem. The first one, what you need to do, you need to read the poem in its entirety to get a general impression. Please do not check your Google. Don't ask your Uncle Google. Okay, don't look at anybody's or anyone's analysis. Just read the poem in its entirety on your own. Okay, do not cheat. So because you will have your own general impression of the poem. You are the one who talks about the poem. So in terms of approaches, we call it new criticism or poetic explication. We don't really care about biography, the figures of speech or anything. All you need to do, just try to check it or just try to analyze the poem on your own. You should not include any other aspects, okay? Any other aspects. Just try to look at the poems in its entirety on your own. So, what is the poem about? Okay, ask yourself, well, what is the poem about? After having read the poem, then you can ask, what is the poem about? And also, you can answer this question: who is the speaker or narrative voice in the poem? Who is the speaker or narrative voice in the poem? Okay, so to whom is the speaker speaking? Right? So what is the purpose of the poem anyway? What is the tone of the poem anyway? So very soon we'll be talking about these guidelines and questions. Let's start our first poem, please. Who's the one
Me.
in charge of this stanza?
Me.
Okay, let me explain to you. What does that mean, okay? What does that mean by stanza in poetry?
Okay. So can I go about it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So basically a stanza is a poetic form in which you see a fixed number of lines, right? Like in this one stanza, we have 5 lines each.
5 lines.
Right.
Okay. So it's like a paragraph, right? So it's like a paragraph in
poetry.
Reading passage. In reading
Yes.
passage. So we call it stanza. Okay, we call it stanza or stanza. So the road not taken. Let me ask Adifa first. Okay. In what year was this poem written?
In what year was the poem The Road Not Taken written?
Yes.
Right. It was written in 1916, I believe. It was published in 1916.
Right. But you know, Adifa, the fact is that sometimes one poem had undergone a number of revisions, a number of revisions. Like, the poem, not Lenore, The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. You know that poem?
Yes.
The Raven. So yeah, consisting of 18 stanza. Okay, 18 stanzas. So actually, it underwent a number of revisions. Okay, so actually,
Right.
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure of this poem, whether or not it had undergone some revisions, or it was the final version. But I believe it's
Teacher, your voice is echoing.
Is echoing. Okay, is that echoing? Hello?
Yes, teacher.
Yeah, uncle, it's echoing.
Hello? Okay, wait. Hello? Hello?
Yes, teacher, it's okay now.
Okay, now it's okay. Right. Hello? Hello?
It's still same, I think.
No, it's still echoing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm not really sure. Hello? It's better now? Pee-wee?
Yeah, it's better. There's
Oh,
no
it's
echo
better.
anymore.
Okay, it's really good. Okay, now, can we start?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, teacher, the echo is probably because of me. Can I hop off and hop on back again?
Okay, sure. Okay, our first presenter is Adifa.
Yeah, uncle.
Wait, Adifa.
All right. Okay, no. Yeah.
Okay, I hope it's better
Great.
now.
Yes, so can I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so first up, we'll talk about the poet. His name was Robert Frost, Robert Lee Frost. He happens to be an American poet, and his work was initially published in England before it was published in United States. So we go back to, when he was born and everything. We'll not discuss that in a lot of detail, but we'll still touch it. He was born in 1874 in San Francisco, and he had a really, his life was pretty full of grief and everything. He lost his father at the age of 11, and his family was left with just $8 to start with. Then he lost his mother late in life. His sister was admitted to a mental institution later. So his life was pretty full of grief, which is important for us to know to be able to go ahead with it. Right? The second thing I'd like you to know is more specific to the poem. Robert Frost, when he wrote this poem, The Road Not Taken, it was actually written as a joke for his friend, who also happened to be a poet, called Edward Thomas. Okay, so this poem wasn't really intended to have a very serious meaning that we take to it now. It was written as a joke for a friend of his who was also a poet called Edward Thomas. When they were walking together, Thomas happened to be very disturbed. He did not have this idea of which road he should be taking in literal sense, right? They were walking together one day and they came about a couple of these roads, and Thomas could not decide where he wanted to go. Mary Grace, could you please mute your mic? Okay. So what happened was Thomas could not really decide where to go. So Robert Frost, being the poet he was, he thought about it and he decided to write a poem on his situation. He ended up with this beautiful piece named The Road Not Taken, right? And what happened was soon after he wrote it, he read it out in a college. He read it out to a bunch of college students. It was an audience, right? And when he got back from there, he saw that these children, these students, they happened to take the poem very seriously when it was not even intended to be a serious poem. And he comes up and he says that I did not intend it, but students took it pretty seriously. I tried my best to make it very oblivious, to make sure that I was funny, but it didn't come out that way. And then he came up with this to back up his idea of it. He says, but I know that I am the most serious when I'm joking. Okay, so to back it up, he says, I am the most serious. My writings turn out the best, or they turn out the most serious when I'm trying to be funny about it. So the deal was that this poem, because we are going to analyze it, we are going to take a very symbolic meaning to it. We're going to discuss it as a very serious piece and what it goes about. But actually, just so you know, it was not intended to be a serious piece. It was later, when he read it out to college students, that he figured that it sounded serious, and then he said that he sounds more serious when he's joking. Now, what the poem is about, we'll go about the theme, and then we'll talk about, everything that comes after it, the structure, right? So about the theme, the poem is about this...
Wait, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes, teacher, it's okay.
Would you like to read the first stanza first?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, don't forget to read it, okay?
Yeah, but about the theme, I'll have to read the entire poem for the theme.
Yes.
But I'll read it anyway.
Yeah.
Reads, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Okay, so that's about the first stanza. I'm sorry about reading that. Right. Can I?
Sure. Focus on the theme first.
Right. So about the poem, the theme, the thematic area of the poem, it discusses how choices are inevitable. It actually talks about choices and how we sometimes are forced to make choices and we can't really see what happens with them in the future. So we can't tell. We stand at this place where we are very uncertain and very confused about where it's going, right? So we don't know where we are ending up with whatever path we take, which is what the poem goes about in detail. About the scheme of the poem, we already discussed that the first 5 lines, the paragraphs, as the paragraphs are in proses, in poetry we have stanzas. The rhyme scheme right here is A, B, A, B, which you can notice from the last words, right? The last words, last sounds of the poem. Would, stood, and could. All those 3 would be an A, and A. Both and growth come out to be a B and a B. Okay? So the scheme is A, B, A, B. It also has 4 stressed syllables per line, but 2 of them are not stressed as much as the other 2. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, right? So the first 2 syllables are not really stressed upon as much as the second 2 syllables. By syllables, wait, what? Did somebody say something?
No.
Okay.
Just ignore it.
By syllables, I mean the unit of pronunciation with 1 vowel sound, right? 1 vowel sound with the surrounding consonants. So we are only focused on the vowel sounds here in terms of when we are talking about syllables, right? Now we'll come to maybe the first stanza and talk about it more, yeah?
Do you want to do line per line analysis, or you just want to sum it up?
Oh, I could do both, if you'd allow me to.
Which one do you prefer? One.
I prefer going line to line.
Yeah, line to line. Okay, go for it, please.
Okay. Also, I'd like to tell you that this style of poetry writing is called a quintain, which means it's a 5-line stanza. Okay? A quintain. Right. So, we'll read the poetry. We'll read the first stanza line by line, and I'll try to. Maybe the author did not know that much. What's that about?
Yes, Bestie. Yeah. Yeah, Adifa knows better.
No.
Yeah, sometimes, but probably if only Robert Frost were alive, probably he would be surprised that the critics performed better. And I didn't really mean that, but the critics came up with a variety of analysis, right? Yes.
Right. So we'll go about every line and we'll try to dissect it.
Yeah.
The first line reads, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood. So we'll talk about the setting here first. Now, the poem is set in a yellow wood. By a yellow wood, a wood means forest here, right? And yellow necessarily symbolizes autumn. An autumn forest is usually yellow in color because the leaves are turning yellow, right? And then what autumn really symbolizes is autumn is in symbolism of invitation and melancholy at the same time. Autumn is both inviting and melancholic, by which I mean that, towards autumn, it so happens that a lot of trees have fruits on them. And it's still autumn when you pluck them all off, right? So you're not sure if the trees are still fruit-laden or they're not unless you really walk up to them. But this is the idea of the setting, okay? The setting is a yellow wood, which means a forest with decomposing leaves, fallen leaves, leaves that are changing color, nearly dead, right? So 2 roads diverge. When we talk about a divergence in roads, we mean a fork, right? What happens is a fork, by a fork, I mean one road goes straight and then it splits up into 2, right? So it's you can sense it in a very literal manner if you want. Like there are 2 roads and they're diverging and they're passing through a yellow wood, a yellow forest. Yellow because the leaves are turning yellow, right? And then he says, and sorry, I could not travel both. Now, what he's doing in this line again is that he's expressing his idea, his wish to be able to travel both of these roads. So what we see here is basically that he has 2 roads in front of him and he has to walk past any one of them. But he can't really walk on both at the same time, which is very understandable. If you have ever been through a fork, you know that you can't travel 2 roads at the same time and you can only take one. So that's essentially what he's talking about. We'll also discuss the poetic devices that have been used. Here he uses imagery because he's giving you an image, an idea, a visual of what it looks like, the diverging of the 2 roads and the yellow wood. Also, he happens to use another literary device that is called parallelism. Do you know about that? Okay, so parallelism means when you use words, phrases, or sentences that have the same grammatical forms, the same parts of speeches, which is happening here. And sorry, I could not travel both. Right? I could not. And when you go back down there, you see as I could. So the similar grammatical usage is being repeated in the paragraph itself. These are the 2 we are talking about here. There are also many more to come. Maybe they won't be covered in this stanza, and I'd like everybody else to focus on whatever they find in theirs, right? So, and be one traveler, long I stood. Now, he calls himself a lone traveler because he's there alone, he's one, and the roads are 2. So he's standing there at the fork, at the divergence, thinking about what road he should really take, and looked down one as far as I could. So what his best bet is that he looks down one road. He looks to the end, right? He looks down a road and sees as far as he can see. Because the road is not straight, and it is a forest, which means, there are a lot of trees, a lot of obstructions that are barring him to see the road further. So he looked down on this road as far as he could. As far as, what do we have there? A comparison, right? As far as. And that comparison right there is called a simile. It's a poetic device. As far as. Simile is a device which is used to compare things with familiar things to let the readers know about it, right? So as far as right there is a simile. We've already discussed 3 devices. We talked about similes, parallelism, and we also talked about imagery already. I looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now, talking about what undergrowth means, right? Undergrowth is a dense growth of shrubs and other plants, which obviously is something that you would find in a forest. Now, a forest doesn't just have trees. It also has shrubs and little plants and, greenery everywhere. So he says that when I looked down this road, one of these roads, to see which one I would pick, I looked as far as I could where it bent in the undergrowth. So what is happening is that this road is bending at some point, right, in the undergrowth. And that's the last thing he could see. The last thing he sees is a lot of dense foliage, and he does not see where the road goes next. Now, to sum up the entire paragraph, it reads, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. Be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Now, the poet, what he's doing here exactly, if we see the symbolic meaning, because right now we've been talking about more about the literal meaning, right? He's standing in a yellow wood, he sees 2 diverged roads, and he knows he cannot travel both. And he's standing there and waiting and looking at the roads to see how far they go. Now we'll come to more of the symbolic meaning of it. So it is about all the decisions, right? All the decisions that we take in our lives where we have 2 choices or more, right? So whenever you have 2 choices, for example, I could be a doctor or I could be an engineer, right? Both the roads, they're both roads, they're both choices, they lead me to different destinations. But I can't really be sure that I'll get what I want from both of these roads, right? I can't just work towards being a doctor, I can just work towards being an engineer. I never know what the future has in store for me. So the most I can do is pick a college, right? And it goes from there. That's as far as I can see it right now. That's what it is about. He's talking about making choices, and he's really thinking about where he should go, and he's looking as far as he can. He's trying to see what would be the best place for him to go. And that would be about it.
Okay.
Oh my God, that is really awesome.
Flawless, it's a flawless analysis.
Yeah. Oh my God.
There's nothing, I have nothing to say about it. Really flawless.
Thank you.
Yeah, impeccable. Wow, amazing. I mean, were you my